Life can change in an instant, just like it did for young Emma. Her journey from heartbreak to hope is a powerful reminder of resilience and love. But what would you have done in her grandmother's place? Do you think Susan made the right decision? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And tell us, where are you watching from? We love hearing from viewers all around the world. If you enjoy real life stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. A brand new emotional story is coming tomorrow. You won't want to miss it. A little girl's fight for the truth, the courtroom reveal no one saw coming. Emma was just 6 years old, a bright and cheerful girl who saw the world through innocent eyes. She lived in a small suburban town with her mother, Rachel, the person she loved most in the world. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with warmth, laughter, and unconditional love. Rachel worked hard to give Emma the best life possible, making sure she always felt safe and cherished. Every morning, she packed Emma's lunch with care, leaving little notes in her lunchbox to brighten her day. Every night, she would read her bedtime stories, tucking her in with a soft kiss on the forehead. Their home was small but cozy, filled with drawings Emma had made, colorful blankets, and the sweet scent of Rachel's homemade cookies. On weekends, they would visit the park, collecting leaves, watching birds, and enjoying simple joys that made their bond so special. For Emma, her mother was her entire world, the one constant in her young life that made everything feel right. One morning started just like any other. The sun was shining, and Emma was excited to go to school. She eagerly chatted about her weekend adventures while Rachel made her favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "I'll pick you up later, sweetheart," Rachel said with a warm smile, kissing her daughter's forehead before sending her off. Emma waved happily as she skipped down the path towards school, completely unaware that this would be the last time she would ever see her mother's smile. The day passed in a blur of laughter, schoolwork, and playtime with friends. But as the afternoon rolled in, something felt different. When dismissal time came, Emma stood by the school gate, waiting for Rachel. Minutes turned into an hour, and worry started to creep into her young heart. That was when the school principal called her into the office. Sitting inside was her father, Mark. His face was pale, his hands buried deep in his pockets as he stared blankly at the floor. When Emma walked in, he turned toward her, his expression tense, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Emma," he said, his voice strained, "there's something I have to tell you." Her little heart pounded. Something was wrong. "Your mother had an accident." Mark hesitated, his voice shaking. She's gone." Emma's world crumbled in an instant. The room spun. Her tiny hands clenched into fists as she tried to understand. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark avoided her eyes. "She's gone, Emma. She's not coming back." The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her, pulling her under. Nothing would ever be the same again. That night, the house felt different, cold, empty, and silent. The warmth that once filled every room was gone, just like Rachel. Emma sat on her bed, clutching the teddy bear her mother had given her last Christmas. She stared at the door, half expecting Rachel to walk in, tuck her in, and whisper, "Good night, sweetheart." But that moment never came. Down the hall, her father, Mark, sat in the dark, barely speaking. He didn't hug her, didn't tell her everything would be okay. Instead, he muttered a simple, emotionless phrase before disappearing into his room. "You'll need to be strong now. Things have changed." Emma didn't understand. How could she be strong when her whole world had just been ripped away? The days that followed were even worse. The home that once felt like a safe haven was now just a house, lifeless and cold. Mark became more distant, barely acknowledging her presence. He didn't ask if she had eaten, didn't check if she was okay. Every night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the eerie silence. The only thing that remained of her mother was the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. Mealtimes were different, too. Rachel used to cook warm homemade meals, making sure Emma always had her favorites. But now, dinner was whatever Mark could throw together, if he even bothered at all. Some nights, Emma went to bed hungry, her stomach aching, but she didn't dare complain. She could already feel Mark pulling further and further away. One evening, she tried to talk about her mother, hoping to find some comfort. "Dad, remember how Mom used to make pancakes every Saturday?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Mark didn't even look at her. "That won't bring her back," he said coldly before walking away. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. She wasn't trying to bring her mother back. She just didn't want to forget. But Mark didn't seem to care. The nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, Emma felt like the walls were closing in. She traced raindrops on the window with her finger, pretending it was her mother's hand guiding her. But deep down, she knew. She was alone now. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of grief settled heavily on Emma's small shoulders. The warmth of her home had been replaced by an unbearable emptiness. Mark barely spoke to her, retreating further into his own world, leaving Emma to navigate her pain alone. Then, one afternoon, her grandmother Susan arrived. The moment she stepped through the door, she could see it. Emma's thin frame, her hollow eyes, the way she barely spoke above a whisper. Susan's heart broke. This wasn't the same lively little girl she had known, the one who used to run into her arms with laughter and excitement. Sitting beside Emma on the couch, Susan gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "How are you, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Emma forced a small smile. "I'm fine, Grandma." But her voice lacked any conviction, and Susan knew better. As the days passed, Susan visited more often, bringing home-cooked meals and trying to bring some warmth back into Emma's life. But Mark grew distant, cold, even. He barely acknowledged Susan's presence, brushing off her concerns as unnecessary interference. One evening, Susan found Emma sitting alone on the kitchen floor, eating a dry peanut butter sandwich. Her heart clenched. "Why are you eating down here, sweetheart?" she asked, kneeling beside her. Emma hesitated before whispering, "Dad said he didn't have time to make dinner." That was the moment Susan knew. She couldn't ignore this anymore. She started keeping track of everything: the empty fridge, the unwashed clothes, the distant look in Emma's eyes. She took pictures, wrote down everything Emma told her, preparing for what she knew might be an uphill battle. Then she made the decision. She was going to fight for custody. But when Mark discovered her plans, his reaction was immediate and explosive. "You think you can take my daughter from me?" he spat, his face twisted in anger. Susan stood her ground, her voice firm. "Emma needs love and care, Mark, and you're not giving her that." Mark's expression darkened, but then something changed. He took a breath, straightened his posture, and forced a smile. "Fine," he said smoothly. "If you think I'm such a bad father, I'll prove you wrong." But as Emma watched him, a cold pit formed in her stomach. She didn't trust that sudden kindness, and soon enough, she would learn why. From that day on, everything changed. Suddenly, Mark was a different person, attentive, present, even affectionate. He started buying Emma toys, taking her out for ice cream, and acting as if he had been the perfect father all along. At first, Emma wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that her dad had finally realized how much she needed him. But something about it felt off. Susan wasn't convinced either. She saw right through Mark's sudden transformation. It wasn't love, it was strategy. He had learned about her plan to fight for custody, and now he was trying to paint himself as the devoted father. But Emma could feel the difference. His smiles never quite reached his eyes. His kindness felt rehearsed. One night, she overheard something that sent chills down her spine. Lying in bed, she heard Mark talking on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, but she could make out the words. "I need this to look real," he muttered. "If Susan wins custody, I'm finished." A pause, then a cruel chuckle. "The life insurance money is the real prize here. If she takes Emma, I lose everything." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She clamped her hands over her mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs. He didn't care about her. He never had. Tears welled in her eyes as she pieced everything together. The sudden attention, the gifts, the forced smiles. It had all been a lie. He wasn't fighting for her because he loved her. He was fighting for her mother's money. The weight of betrayal crushed her. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her small hands trembling. The father she wanted to trust was nothing more than a selfish man playing a role. And now, she was trapped in his game. But as the fear settled deep in her bones, another feeling began to take its place. Determination. She wouldn't let him win. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen, her face pale but her mind clear. Susan was sitting at the table, her eyes weary but kind. Emma took a deep breath and whispered, "Grandma, I have to tell you something." And just like that, the battle truly began. The day of the hearing arrived, and Emma sat beside Susan in the courtroom, gripping her grandmother's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. The room felt massive, overwhelming, but she forced herself to stay strong. She had to. This was her chance to be heard. Mark sat across the room, dressed in a sharp suit, his posture confident. He had rehearsed this moment, prepared every word, every excuse. His lawyer spoke first, painting him as a devoted father who had done everything in his power to take care of his daughter. Mr. Carter has been a responsible parent, the lawyer claimed. He has provided for Emma, ensuring she has everything she needs. Emma's stomach churned. Everything she needs? She thought about the nights she had gone to bed hungry, the cold silence that filled their home, the way he had used her as a pawn for money. Then it was Susan's turn. Her lawyer laid out everything: the photos, the notes, the proof of neglect. He revealed how Mark had only started showing affection once he realized his finances were at risk. Susan sat quietly, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice was steady when she finally spoke. Emma is just a child. She needs love, security, and a home where she is truly cared for. I can give her that. Then came the moment Emma had been dreading. The judge called her to the stand. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as she climbed onto the seat, her small frame barely visible behind the large desk. She looked at the judge, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear. "Emma," the judge said gently, "can you tell us how you feel living with your father?" She swallowed hard. This was it. The truth had to come out. "He doesn't care about me," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "He only wants my mom's money. I heard him say it." She looked down, then forced herself to continue. "He never hugs me. He never talks about my mom. He just wants to win." A silence fell over the courtroom. Mark shifted in his seat, his confident mask cracking. The judge studied Emma carefully, then nodded. "Thank you, Emma. That was very brave." The gavel struck, echoing through the room. The judge granted Susan temporary custody while an investigation into Mark's actions continued. As they left the courtroom, Susan pulled Emma into a tight embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma let herself breathe. She was finally safe. Emma's journey was filled with heartbreak, resilience, and hope. Imagine being in her shoes, losing a mother, feeling abandoned by a father, and fighting for a place where she truly felt loved. What would you have done if you were Emma? Would you have had the courage to stand up and speak the truth? And what about Susan? She saw the neglect, the pain, and chose to fight for her granddaughter. If you were in her position, would you have risked everything to protect Emma, even when the odds were stacked against you? We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Emma's story? Have you or someone you know ever faced a similar situation where standing up for what's right wasn't easy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, tell us where you're watching from. It's incredible to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. And if you love real-life stories of resilience and hope, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have another powerful story coming tomorrow that you won't want to miss. Let's keep this conversation going.